Everyone got gifts but me. Ivy laughed. Oh, we must have misplaced yours. They expected silence. I smiled. That's okay, here's what I got myself. The room froze when they saw it. My name is Audrey, 33 years old, and I am the black sheep of a family that worships money above blood. For years I played the role of the failure, the dropout, the disappointment just to survive their toxicity. But this Christmas in Aspen was going to be different. This was the year the sheep became the wolf. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. We were gathered in the main dining hall of a $10 million chalet in Aspen, Colorado. Outside, a blizzard was burying the mountains in white, but inside the fire was roaring, and the room smelled of roasted duck and expensive perfume. My mother, Pamela, stood at the head of the table holding a champagne glass. She looked like royalty in her velvet dress, but her eyes were cold as ice. She tapped her glass for attention. I want to propose a toast, she said, smiling at everyone except me. To my wonderful daughter, Brittany, and her brilliant husband, Damon. Thank you for making our family name proud, and for upholding our legacy. Brittany beamed, squeezing Damon's hand. I sat at the far end of the table picking at my napkin. I was wearing a sweater from Target while Brittany was draped in Chanel. The contrast was deliberate. Tonight was the gift exchange, and I knew exactly what was coming. Pamela reached under the tree and pulled out a small box wrapped in gold paper. For Damon, she announced. He opened it to reveal a Patek Philippe watch worth more than my entire college tuition. Thank you, Pamela, Damon said, sliding it onto his wrist and glancing at me with a superior smirk. It is good to be appreciated. Next was Brittany. My mother handed her a small, heavy box. Brittany screamed before she even opened it. Inside was a set of car keys with the Porsche crest. It is the new Cayenne Turbo, parked in the heated garage, Pamela said softly. You deserve the best for being the face of our family. Brittany jumped up and hugged our mother, squealing with delight while I sat there in silence. The air in the room grew heavy. Everyone knew it was my turn. The laughter died down. Damon checked his new watch, pretending to be bored. Brittany sat back down, clutching her keys, looking at me with pity. Pamela walked slowly back to the tree. There were no more gold boxes, no more ribbons. She reached behind a pile of gifts and pulled out a thin, plain white business envelope. It looked like a utility bill. She walked over to me and slid it across the mahogany table. It stopped right in front of my empty plate. The sound of paper sliding on wood seemed to echo in the silent room. Open it, Brittany urged, giggling. Maybe it is a gift card. I looked up at my mother. Her face was a mask of fake sympathy. Audrey, I know things have been hard for you since you quit medical school, she said loud enough for the staff in the kitchen to hear. We did not think a lavish gift was appropriate given your situation. We think this suits your current lifestyle better. I stared at the envelope. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, not from shame, but from a cold, burning anger. They thought I was broke. They thought I was helpless. I reached out and touched the paper. It was light, flimsy, just like their love for me. I tore it open slowly. Inside, there was no check, no cash. Just a single sheet of paper with a breakdown of costs. $400 for groceries, $200 for utilities. It was an invoice for my existence at their Christmas dinner. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled the single sheet of paper from the envelope. It was not a check. It was not a gift card. It was an invoice printed on my mother's personal stationery. At the top in bold letters it read, Vacation Cost-Sharing Breakdown. I scanned the items listed, $400 for groceries, $200 for utilities, $100 for cleaning fees. The total came to $700. I looked up at my mother, who was sipping her champagne as if she had just done me a great favor. Is this a joke? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Pamela set her glass down and sighed the way one sighs at a slow child. No, Audrey, it is a lesson. You are 33 years old. You have been unemployed for 2 years since you dropped out of medical school to find yourself. We felt it was time you understood that the lifestyle you enjoy comes at a cost. Since you do not contribute anything meaningful to society, we thought you should at least contribute to this vacation. Brittany covered her mouth to hide a giggle, but her eyes were dancing with malicious delight. She pointed her phone camera directly at my face, zooming in on my reaction. It is only fair, Audrey, she chimed in. Damon and I paid for the flights. Mom paid for the rental. You are the only one just riding along for free. It is called accountability. I felt a knot form in my stomach. It was not about the money. I had millions sitting in offshore accounts they knew nothing about. It was about the cruelty, the calculated humiliation of handing me a bill while they handed each other Rolexes and Porsches. Before I could respond, Damon cleared his throat and opened his laptop. He adjusted his glasses, looking every bit the arrogant corporate lawyer he was. Actually, Pamela, he said, tapping away at his keyboard, If we account for inflation and the current consumer price index in Aspen, that 700 figure is quite generous. I just ran a quick calculation based on square footage usage. Audrey is occupying the guest suite, which is 15% of the total floor plan. Plus, she consumes approximately 3,000 calories of premium food daily. He turned the laptop screen toward me, showing a spreadsheet he had apparently prepared beforehand. Strictly speaking, Audrey, you actually owe us closer to $900. But we are family, so we are giving you a discount. Consider the $200 difference our Christmas gift to you. The room went silent. They waited for me to cry. They waited for me to beg or to scream that I did not have that kind of money. That was the script they had written for me. The poor, helpless failure of a daughter. But they did not know I had rewritten the ending. I looked at the spreadsheet, then at Damon's smug face, then at my mother's cold, expectant eyes. I did not get angry. I did not shout. I simply reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen illuminated my face in the dim light. Fine, I said, keeping my voice steady. $700. Who should I send it to? Pamela blinked, surprised by my lack of emotion. You can transfer it to my personal account, she said stiffly. But do not think this buys you any special treatment. You are still expected to help the staff clear the table. I tapped my screen a few times. A soft ding echoed from my mother's purse on the floor. Transaction complete, I said, sliding my phone back into my pocket. Now that we have settled my debt for the food, perhaps we can move on to the next item of business. I reached down to the floor and picked up the small black box I had brought with me. I placed it gently on the center of the table right next to the centerpiece. Because unlike you, I did not come empty-handed. Brittany did not just watch me hold the invoice, she broadcasted it. She whipped out her phone, the latest model naturally, and tapped the screen with her manicured nails. Oh my God, you guys have to see this. She chirped into the lens, her voice instantly shifting to that high-pitched fake enthusiasm she reserved for her social media. She was live streaming to her close friends list, which I knew included every mean girl she had gone to high school with, and probably half the country club wives. She panned the phone around the table, showing off the crystal glasses, the fire roaring in the background, and finally landing on me. Say hi, Audrey, she commanded, shoving the phone in my face. We are teaching my big sister a little lesson about the real world today. Look at her face, she is so confused. She zoomed in on the invoice in my hand, then back to my outfit. And can we talk about this fit check? I think that sweater is from the Gap circa 2010. It is literally pilling at the elbows. Honestly, she should be grateful we even let her sit at the adults' table tonight. Most people who contribute $0 to the family vacation would be eating in the kitchen with the help. Right, babe? She turned the camera to Damon, who flashed a winning smile and waved his new Patek Philippe watch at the lens. Teaching fiscal responsibility is a kindness, Brittany, he said, smooth as silk. We are just helping her grow up. Brittany giggled, that cruel bubbling sound that used to make me run to my room in tears when we were kids. Not anymore. I sat perfectly still. I knew exactly who was watching that stream. People who judged worth by designer labels and zip codes. Let them watch. Let them see exactly who Brittany and Damon were. I did not scream. I did not throw the wine in her face, though the thought did cross my mind. Instead, I picked up my phone. My hands were steady. I opened the banking app on my screen. Not the secure encrypted app that managed my portfolio at Titanium Ventures. The basic one. The one that showed a balance of $2,000, which they thought was my life savings. I entered my mother email address. I typed in $700. Brittany was still monologuing to her phone. She is probably going to ask Dad for a loan from beyond the grave, she joked. I pressed the confirm button. The signal in Aspen was excellent. Instantaneous. Ding. The sound cut through Brittany chatter like a knife. It came from my mother purse sitting on the floor. It was the distinct notification sound of a cash transfer. Pamela blinked, reaching down to retrieve her phone. She stared at the screen. Her eyebrows shot up. She paid it. Pamela set her voice flat with surprise. The full amount. Brittany lowered her phone. The live stream still running but capturing only the tablecloth now. Wait, she actually had $700. She sounded disappointed. She wanted a fight. She wanted me to beg. She wanted content. I locked my phone and set it down next to my empty plate. Transaction complete. I said, my voice cool and detached. I believe that covers my room and board. Now, if you do not mind, I would like to eat the dinner I just purchased. Brittany scoffed, rolling her eyes, and finally ended the stream. She looked at me with a mix of annoyance and suspicion. You probably overdrafted, she muttered, picking up her fork. I just smiled and cut into my steak. The small box sat on the center of the table, stark and unadorned against the crystal and silver. It was wrapped in matte black paper with no ribbon, no bow, and absolutely no card. It looked less like a Christmas present and more like a piece of evidence. Brittany leaned forward, squinting at it with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Is that it? She asked, poking the box with a manicured finger. It looks ominous. Did you make us something, Audrey? Like one of those DIY craft projects you used to do in therapy. Damon let out a short, barking laugh. It is probably homemade cookies, he sneered, reaching out to grab the box. Or maybe coupons for free hugs. He shook the box violently next to his ear. It made no sound. It felt solid. But light. Whatever it is definitely not in the same tax bracket as a Porsche or a Patek Philippe. He made a motion as if to toss it over his shoulder toward the trash can in the corner of the room. Let us save ourselves the disappointment and clear the table for dessert. I did not flinch. I did not reach out to stop him. I simply watched them play out the roles I knew they would play. But before Damon could release the box, Pamela spoke up. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the malevolence like a whip. Damon, put it down, she commanded. We are not savages. We will accept the gift with grace, regardless of its value. It is the thought that counts after all, even if the thought is minimal. Damon rolled his eyes but obeyed, tossing the black box back onto the table where it slid and hit the pepper shaker. Pamela picked it up using only her fingertips as if she were worried it might be sticky or contaminated. She walked over to the towering Christmas tree, which was already overflowing with designer bags and orange Hermes boxes. She knelt down and tucked my black box deep into the back behind a large gift basket of imported truffles. There, she said, dusting off her hands. We will open it when we open everything else on Christmas morning. Actually, I interrupted, my voice cutting through the air. Not Christmas morning. That box is to be opened at midnight on New Year's Eve. Consider it a way to ring in the new year. A fresh start for everyone. Brittany groaned, throwing her head back. Oh my God, you have to make everything so dramatic. Is it a time capsule or something? That is so cringe, Audrey. Seriously, just let us open it now so we can pretend to like it and move on. No, I said, firmly taking a sip of my water. Midnight on the 31st. That is the condition. If you open it before, then the gift becomes void. Pamela sighed, clearly exhausted by my presence. Fine, Audrey. Whatever makes you feel important. We will open your little mystery box on New Year's Eve. Now, if you are quite finished being mysterious, could you please help the staff clear these plates? We have a spa appointment in 45 minutes, and I do not want the smell of gravy lingering in the air. They all stood up, their chairs scraping against the hardwood floor, turning their backs on me and the table. They walked away, talking about massage treatments and ski slopes, completely forgetting about the black box hidden in the shadows of the tree. They had no idea that they were sleeping next to a ticking time bomb. Inside that box was not cookies or crafts. It was the legal paperwork that would strip them of the very company they were boasting about. I watched them leave, a small cold smile finally touching my lips. Enjoy the spa, I whispered to the empty room. It will be the last luxury you enjoy for a very long time. Dinner concluded not with warmth, but with a flurry of activity as my family prepared for their next indulgence. Pamela clapped her hands, signaling the end of the meal. Chop chop, everyone, she announced, checking her watch. The limousine will be here in 10 minutes to take us to the Alpine Sanctuary Spa. I booked the midnight rejuvenation package. It is the only way to recover from a meal this heavy. Brittany squealed, clapping her hands together. Oh, thank God. My pores are literally screaming for a diamond dust facial. Damon stood up, stretching his arms. A hot stone massage sounds like exactly what I need after dealing with all the stress of the business. I stood up too, reaching for my coat, which was draped over the back of my chair. I assumed I was coming. After all, a family vacation usually implied doing things as a family. Damon held up a hand, stopping me in my tracks. Where do you think you are going, Audrey? He asked, his voice dripping with condescension. I paused, my hand hovering over my coat. To the spa, I replied. Mom said she booked a package. Pamela sighed, adjusting her diamond earrings in the reflection of the window. I did book a package, darling, she said without turning around. But it is the Platinum Family Estate package. It strictly covers 4 people. Me, Brittany, Damon, and little Leo. The resort is very strict about capacity limits. I looked around. Brittany's son Leo was currently asleep in the nursery upstairs with the nanny. You are taking a 2-year-old to a midnight spa session instead of your sister, I asked. Brittany stepped in, fixing me with a glare. Leo has sensitive skin, Audrey. The mineral waters are good for him. Besides, the membership requires the same last name or legal dependents. You are neither. You are. You are just here. So, what am I supposed to do? I asked, feeling the familiar sting of exclusion. Pamela gestured vaguely at the table filled with dirty dishes and wine-stained napkins. Well, since you are staying behind, you can make yourself useful. The cleaning staff does not come until morning, and I hate waking up to a mess. Clear the table, load the dishwasher, scrub the pots. Consider it part of your contribution to the household expenses, since you were so eager to pay your way earlier. Damon laughed, clapping me on the shoulder hard enough to sting. Do not worry, Audrey. Getting your hands dirty builds character. Maybe if you scrub hard enough, you will wash away some of that failure. They swept out of the room in a cloud of expensive cologne and fur, leaving me standing alone in the silence. The heavy oak front door slammed shut, and moments later I heard the crunch of tires on snow as their limousine pulled away. I was alone. I walked over to the sink and turned on the tap. The water was freezing, but I did not adjust it. I picked up my mother wine glass, scrubbing away her lipstick stain. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my back pocket. One short, sharp vibration. I dried my hands on a dish towel and pulled it out. The screen glowed in the semi-darkness. It was a message from my personal assistant at Titanium Ventures. It read, simply, Phase 1 activated. The bank just notified Damon of the credit freeze. They have no idea what is coming. I looked at the message and then at the dirty dishes. I set the phone down and picked up a sponge. Let them have their spa. By tomorrow morning, they would not even be able to afford a bar of soap. The chalet was silent except for the wind howling against the timber beams. It was 2 a.m, and the family had returned from their spa treatment hours ago, glowing with expensive oils and false contentment. I was still awake, sitting in the darkened kitchen, nursing a glass of water. I had spent the last 3 hours scrubbing every plate and polishing every crystal glass until my hands were raw. As I turned to head back to the guest suite, I heard a noise coming from the downstairs powder room. It was a hushed, angry whisper. I paused, my footsteps silent on the thick Persian rug. The door was cracked open just a sliver, letting a beam of yellow light cut across the hallway floor. It was Damon. He was pacing back and forth in the small room, his shadow stretching and shrinking against the wall. "Listen to me, you incompetent bureaucrat," he hissed into his phone. "I do not care what the compliance department says. We have a liquidity issue, not a solvency issue. There is a difference." I pressed myself against the wall, holding my breath. Damon was usually so composed, so arrogant with his legal jargon and his Patek Philippe watch. But now he sounded like a cornered animal. There was a pause as the person on the other end spoke. "No, you cannot freeze the operating accounts." Damon snapped, his voice rising in panic before he caught himself and lowered it again. "If you freeze those accounts, payroll bounces on Friday. Do you know what happens if the staff at the hotel do not get paid? The unions will eat us alive." I took a sip of water, letting the cool liquid calm my racing heart. This was it. Phase 1 was working faster than I anticipated. My team at Titanium Ventures had obviously executed the credit freeze I ordered. "Look, just give me 48 hours. Damon pleaded, desperation seeping into his tone. "I am in Aspen right now. I am working on a solution. I have assets I can liquidate. Just do not send the default notice to the main office. My mother-in-law is the registered agent. If she sees that letter..." He stopped listening again. Then he slammed his hand against the marble vanity. $5 million is nothing, he lied through his teeth. "The company is valued at $50 million. We are good for it. I just need time to move some capital around. $5 million. The number hung in the air. I knew things were bad, but I did not realize they were underwater by $5 million. And the worst part was not the debt itself. It was the deception. Pamela and Brittany were sleeping upstairs, dreaming of their perfect life, believing they were royalty. Meanwhile, Damon was down here fighting off the executioner while pretending everything was fine. He was protecting his ego, not the family. He knew if Pamela found out he had run the company into the ground, she would cut him off before he could say alimony. I watched as he ran a hand over his face, looking exhausted and terrified. He ended the call without saying goodbye. I slipped away into the shadows, moving silently up the stairs before he could open the door. I went back to my room and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Damon thought he had 48 hours to fix this. He was wrong. He did not even have until sunrise. The sun had barely risen over the snow-capped peaks of Aspen when I found Damon waiting for me in the kitchen. He was wearing his cashmere robe and holding 2 mugs of coffee. The panic I had witnessed the night before was completely gone, replaced by a veneer of brotherly concern that made my skin crawl. "Good morning, Audrey," he said, offering me a mug. "I made you a latte oat milk just the way you like it." I took the mug, eyeing him suspiciously. Damon never did anything without a motive. "Thank you," I said cautiously, taking a sip. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" He leaned against the marble island, crossing his ankles. "I have been thinking about you, Audrey, about what Mom said at dinner last night. It was harsh. But you know she only wants what is best for you. I want to help you too." I stayed silent, waiting for the other shoe to drop. He pulled a folder from the counter. It was not the invoice this time. It was a legal document. "I know Dad left you that small trust fund," he continued, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper. $200,000, right? It is sitting in a low-yield savings account doing absolutely nothing. Inflation is eating it alive. As your brother-in-law and a financial expert, I hate to see you losing money. I want to help you manage it. I set my mug down. You want to manage my trust fund? I asked, widening my eyes in mock innocence. But, Damon, I thought you said I was bad with money. Wouldn't it be safer in the bank? He laughed a short condescending sound. That is exactly why you need me. The markets are volatile, Audrey. You need sophisticated management. I can roll that money into one of my high-performing equity funds. I can double it in a year. You would not have to worry about invoices for dinner ever again. Just sign this power of attorney and I will handle everything. He slid the document toward me along with a gold pen. I picked up the paper pretending to read it. It was a standard transfer of assets granting him full control. He wanted to liquidate my inheritance to plug the hole in his sinking company. So, this is like a mutual fund, I asked, looking up at him blankly. Like the ones they advertise on TV. Damon sighed, his patience already fraying. No, Audrey, it is much more complex than that. It is an exclusive vehicle for accredited investors. You would not understand the technicalities. Just know that I am doing you a huge favor. But what about the risk, I pressed, putting on my most confused expression? If the market crashes, do I lose everything? Or is it insured like the bank? He slammed his hand down on the counter just a fraction too hard. The mask slipped. Jesus, Audrey, stop asking stupid questions. Do you want to be poor forever? Do you want to be the pathetic sister who cannot pay for her own dinner? I am offering you a lifeline. Sign the damn paper. I looked at his flushed face, the vein throbbing in his temple. He was desperate. He needed my 200 grand to buy himself another day of life. I pushed the paper back toward him. I think I will stick with the bank, I said calmly. I like knowing exactly where my money is. Damon stared at me, his eyes cold and venomous. You are making a mistake, he hissed, grabbing the folder. A huge mistake. When you come crawling to me for a loan, do not expect any mercy. He stormed out of the kitchen, leaving his latte untouched. I watched him go, smiling into my cup. He was right about one thing. Someone was making a huge mistake. But it was not me. Damon moved faster than I expected, blocking the archway between the kitchen and the living room. His friendly brother-in-law act had evaporated completely, leaving behind the ruthless litigator who destroyed lives for a living. You think you have a choice here, Audrey? He said, his voice low and dangerous. You think you can just walk away with that money while this family bleeds? I stopped clutching the edge of the granite counter. The air in the kitchen suddenly felt very thin. I am not asking you anymore. He continued stepping closer, until I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. I am telling you, if you do not sign that power of attorney voluntarily, I will file a petition with the probate court first thing tomorrow morning. Do you know what a conservatorship is, Audrey? I stared at him, my heart pounding against my ribs. He was actually threatening to lock me away. You would not dare, I whispered. Try me, he sneered. It would be so easy. I can paint a very convincing picture for a judge. A 33-year-old woman who dropped out of medical school due to a mental breakdown. A woman who has been unemployed for 2 years living off her mother charity. A woman who shows signs of irrational behavior and financial incompetence. I have friends on the bench, Audrey. Friends who owe me favors. All I need is one signature from a doctor and I know plenty of those too. We can have you declared mentally incapacitated before you even finish packing your bags. He paused, letting the weight of his threat sink in. He was weaponizing my lowest moments against me. The time I took off to grieve my father, he was twisting it into a diagnosis of insanity. Once I have conservatorship, I will control everything, he said, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Your bank accounts, your medical decisions, even your freedom to travel. I will be your legal guardian, and I will liquidate that trust fund to save my company whether you like it or not. But that is illegal, I stammered, playing the part of the terrified victim perfectly. You cannot just take away my rights because you need money. Damon laughed, a cold, hard sound that echoed off the high ceilings. Oh, grow up, Audrey. Stop living in a fairy tale. In America, the law protects the people with money, not unemployed failures like you. The law is a weapon, and I am holding the gun. He straightened his robe, looking down at me with absolute contempt. I will leave the papers on the dining table. You have until dinner to sign them. If they are not signed by the time we sit down to eat, I am making the call. Do not test me. He turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the kitchen. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. I was shaking with rage. He had just admitted to conspiracy and extortion, and he had no idea that the security camera in the corner of the kitchen, which I had installed myself during my last visit, had recorded every single word. The door to my guest suite did not just open, it exploded inward. I was sitting on the edge of the bed staring at the snow falling outside when Pamela marched in. She did not look like the elegant matriarch who had toasted with champagne the night before. Her hair was slightly disheveled, and her eyes were wild with a mix of panic and fury. Damon told me everything, she announced, slamming the door behind her. He told me you're refusing to help the family. He told me you are choosing to let us sink. I stood up, clutching my phone tighter. Mom, it is not that simple, I started, but she cut me off with a wave of her hand. Do not you dare speak to me about simplicity, Audrey. Your sister is downstairs crying because she is afraid of losing her home. Damon is trying to save a legacy that has been in this family for 2 generations. And you are sitting up here worrying about a measly $200,000. You are selfish. You have always been selfish. She began to pace around the room, picking up my things and throwing them down. She grabbed my sketchbook, the one I used to map out acquisition strategies, and tossed it onto the floor. Your father would be ashamed of you. She spat out the words like venom. He worked himself into an early grave to build this life for us. He wanted his children to support each other. If he could see you now hoarding his money while his company collapses, he would be heartbroken. You are the biggest disappointment of his life. That hit me harder than a physical blow. My father had been the only one who believed in me. He was the one who taught me to read a balance sheet before I could read a novel. But Pamela was rewriting history, weaponizing his memory to manipulate me. I bit my lip, tasting blood. Mom, please stop, I whispered. You do not know what you are doing. I know exactly what I am doing, she screamed. I am taking control because you are clearly incapable of making the right decision. Where are the papers? Damon said he left them for you. Where are they? She did not wait for an answer. She lunged at my suitcase, which was sitting on the luggage rack. She unzipped it violently and started ripping the contents out. My clothes, my toiletries, my books flew across the room. It was a violation. It was the desperate act of a woman who was losing her grip on her power. I stood frozen, watching my mother ransack my room like a common thief. Finally, she found the folder tucked under my pillow. She held it up triumphantly, shaking it in the air. Here it is. She panted, her chest heaving. She marched over to me and shoved the folder into my chest hard enough to make me stumble back. Sign it, Audrey. Sign it right now, or so help me God, you are no longer my daughter. You will be dead to us. You will walk out into that snow and never come back. I looked at her face. There was no love there, only greed and fear. She was willing to strip me of everything just to keep up appearances for 1 more month. I took the folder. My hands were shaking, but my mind was crystal clear. If I signed this, I gave them a lifeline. If I refused, they would kick me out before I could execute the final phase of my plan. I needed to buy time. I needed them to think they had won. I looked at the pen she was holding out to me. It was a gold Mont Blanc pen engraved with my father's initials. The irony was suffocating. I reached out and took the pen. I held the pen hovering over the signature line, but I did not write. Instead, I pulled my knees up to my chest and clutched my battered leather backpack against my stomach. It was a reflex, a defensive posture I had learned as a child when the shouting started. Please, Mom. I whispered, my voice trembling just enough to sell the performance. This money is my safety net. It is the only thing Dad left me. If I sign this, I have nothing. I cannot just give it up. Brittany, who had been watching from the doorway, stepped into the room. She looked at my backpack, her eyes narrowing. Look at how she is holding that bag, Mom, she said, pointing a perfectly manicured finger. She is hiding something else. I bet she has cash in there. Or maybe checks she has not deposited. She never holds on to anything that tightly unless she does not want us to see it. No, I cried, pulling the bag tighter. It is just my personal things. Please leave it alone. That was all the invitation Brittany needed. She crossed the room in 3 strides and snatched the backpack from my arms. I let her take it, offering just enough resistance to make it look real, but not enough to stop her. She dumped the contents onto the floor. My laptop, my wallet, and a thick sketchbook slid across the carpet. Brittany kicked the laptop aside and grabbed the sketchbook. She flipped through it, laughing cruelly. Look at this, Mom. Drawings. She is 33 years old and she is still drawing pictures of buildings like a kindergartner. She held up a sketch of a modern glass skyscraper I had designed. It was actually the headquarters for Titanium Ventures, but she did not know that. To her, it was just a doodle. You think you are going to be an architect, Audrey? She sneered. You could not even finish medical school. This is trash. She grabbed a handful of pages and ripped them out. The sound of tearing paper filled the room. No, stop, I pleaded, reaching out but staying seated. Brittany laughed and ripped more, throwing the crumpled pages at my face like confetti. This is what your dreams are worth, Audrey. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. She tossed the ruined binder onto the floor and stepped on it with her snow boot, grinding the graphite into the carpet. Now stop being a baby and sign the papers Mom gave you. Or do I need to see what else I can break? I looked at the shredded remains of my work, then up at my mother. Pamela did not stop her. She just stood there, tapping her foot, waiting. They thought they had broken me. They thought I was crying because I was weak. But behind my hands I was memorizing every detail. Brittany had just destroyed property and used intimidation. Add that to the list of charges. The smell of maple syrup and sizzling bacon woke me up the next morning. My stomach rumbled violently, reminding me that I had not eaten since the flight to Aspen 2 days ago. I walked down to the dining room hoping that maybe, just maybe, the previous night was a nightmare. It was not. The family was gathered around the table, which was laden with platters of fruit pastries and eggs Benedict. But there were only 3 place settings. My spot at the end of the table was bare. No plate, no silverware, not even a glass for water. I stood in the doorway watching them eat. Brittany was feeding little Leo a piece of croissant while Damon scrolled through his phone, likely checking if his company had imploded yet. Pamela was the first to acknowledge me. She did not look up from her plate as she cut a piece of ham. Hunger is a powerful motivator, is it not, Audrey? She said, her voice calm and conversational. I stepped into the room, my hands clenched at my sides. Mom, what is this? Am I not allowed to eat now? Pamela finally looked up. Her eyes were devoid of any maternal warmth. Food costs money, Audrey. And as we established yesterday, you have no money. Unless, of course, you have decided to sign the papers Damon gave you. If you sign, you can sit down. You can have coffee, you can have a hot meal. If not, the kitchen is closed. I looked at the spread of food. It looked delicious, but it smelled like blackmail. I am not signing, I said quietly. I am not giving Damon control of my future. Pamela dropped her fork onto her plate with a loud clatter. The sound made everyone jump. Then you are no longer welcome in this house, she announced, standing up. I will not harbor a parasite. You have 1 hour to pack your bags and leave. I looked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, the snow was falling in thick white sheets. The wind was howling, shaking the glass in its frames. The news had warned of a severe blizzard, with temperatures dropping to 10 below zero. Mom, it is a blizzard out there, I said, my voice rising in disbelief. You cannot kick me out in this weather. The roads are closed. I could freeze to death. Pamela picked up her napkin and dabbed the corner of her mouth gracefully. Then I suggest you start walking. Or better yet, sign the papers. The choice is entirely yours. She sat back down and took a sip of her orange juice, signaling that the conversation was over. Brittany refused to meet my eyes, focusing intensely on her son. Damon just smirked, enjoying the show. They were gambling with my life. They thought the fear of the cold would break me. They did not know that I had already arranged for a private car to be waiting down the road. I turned on my heel and walked out of the dining room. I would leave, but I would not be the one freezing. I stopped with my hand on the brass doorknob. The cold radiating from the glass was already seeping into my bones. I turned around slowly. Fine, I said, my voice cracking just enough to sound defeated. I will sign. The tension in the room broke instantly. Damon clapped his hands together, a predatory grin spreading across his face. I knew you would see reason, Audrey. Come back and sit down. The eggs are getting cold. I walked back to the table, moving like a person marching to the gallows. I sat down in my empty chair. Damon slid the papers across the polished wood along with the gold Mont Blanc pen. Right there at the bottom, he instructed, tapping the X with his finger, and initial the first 2 pages. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy in my hand. I looked at the clauses. Full power of attorney. Unrestricted access. It was highway robbery disguised as legal jargon. I glanced at the camera lens on Brittany's phone, which was still recording my humiliation. Good. I wanted witnesses. I pressed the nib to the paper. But instead of my careful practice signature, I scribbled a jagged, illegible mess. It looked more like a seismograph of an earthquake than a name. I did the same on the initials. A quick, angry scratch. There, I said, dropping the pen. Happy now. Damon snatched the papers up before the ink was even dry. He did not even check the signature. He was too blinded by greed and the $5 million hole in his balance sheet. Perfect, he said, sliding the documents into his leather portfolio. You made the right choice, Audrey. You just saved your future. Pamela signaled to the kitchen staff. Bring Miss Audrey a plate. She ordered, her voice returning to its usual haughty cadence. And a fresh pot of coffee. We are a family after all. We take care of each other. I watched Damon rush out of the room, phone already to his ear, eager to wire my inheritance into his failing accounts. He thought he had just won the lottery. He thought he had stripped me of my only asset. He had no idea what he had actually done. By forcing me to sign under duress and accepting a signature that did not match my bank records, he had just committed felony bank fraud. And since the bank he was trying to pay off was owned by me, he had just handed me the final nail for his coffin. I took a bite of the eggs Benedict. They were cold, but they tasted like victory. He had just signed his own death warrant, and he did not even know it. The ink on the fraudulent documents was barely dry when the universe decided to balance the scales. Damon was midway through a boast about how he would reinvest my trust fund when his phone chimed. It was a sharp, aggressive sound that cut through the murmur of conversation. He pulled it out of his pocket, casually expecting another congratulatory text from a colleague or perhaps a notification from his bank. But as his eyes scanned the screen, his expression shifted from arrogance to confusion and then to absolute terror. He dropped his fork onto his plate with a loud clatter that made Brittany jump. "What is it, babe?" she asked, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "Is it the bank?" Damon did not answer immediately. He stared at the screen as if reading his own obituary. His face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of gray. "No," he whispered, his voice trembling. "It is not the bank. The bank sold our debt." Pamela looked up sharply. "What do you mean they sold it? Who did they sell it to?" Damon swallowed hard, loosening his tie, which suddenly seemed too tight. "A firm called Titanium Ventures. They just acquired our entire loan portfolio this morning, and they are not interested in renegotiating." He scrolled down his thumb, moving frantically as he read the legal notice. "They are demanding full repayment of the principal and interest, $5 million, immediately." Today, the silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Immediate repayment." Pamela repeated the words, feeling foreign on her tongue. "That is impossible. The bank gave us until the end of the quarter. They cannot just change the terms." Damon looked up, his eyes wide with panic. "They can, Mom. It is in the fine print. If the debt is sold to a distressed asset firm, they have the right to call in the loan if they deem the borrower insolvent. Titanium Ventures does not want a payment plan. They want their money or they want our assets." I took a sip of my coffee, hiding the smile that threatened to break through. Titanium Ventures. The name sounded so imposing, so corporate. They had no idea that Titanium Ventures was currently sitting at the end of their table eating cold eggs Benedict. They had no idea that the terrifying CEO demanding their ruin was the same daughter they had just tried to rob. "Who are these people?" Brittany asked, her voice rising in hysteria. "Can we sue them?" Damon shook his head, burying his face in his hands. "We cannot sue them, Brittany. They own us. Unless we come up with $5 million in cash by close of business today, they are going to foreclose. They will take the hotel. They will take the house. They will take everything." I watched them spiral. The predators had become the prey in the span of a single email. And the best part was that they thought they still had a lifeline. They thought my trust fund would save them. Damon looked up at me, suddenly clutching the papers I had just signed. "We have Audrey money," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "It is not $5 million, but it is a start. Maybe if we wire them the $200,000 as a good faith payment, they will give us more time." I set my cup down gently. I would not count on it, I thought. But I said nothing. I just let them hope. Because hope makes the fall so much more painful. The next hour was a master class in desperation. Damon had turned the dining room into a crisis command center. He had 3 phones laid out on the table, and he was cycling through them, frantic to find a lifeline. I sat quietly in the corner, sipping a fresh cup of tea, watching the sweat bead on his forehead. It was actually dripping down his temple, staining the collar of his expensive dress shirt. He looked less like a Wall Street shark and more like a man drowning in shallow water. He had already called every contact in his Rolodex. I listened as he begged former law school classmates, hedge fund managers, and even rival firms for a bridge loan. The answer was always the same. I could hear the rejection in the silence that followed each call. Finally, he got hold of a senior partner at his own firm. "Arthur, you have to help me," he pleaded, gripping the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. "It is a hostile takeover. Titanium Ventures, they are moving in for the kill." I leaned forward, slightly straining to hear the voice on the other end of the line. It was faint, but distinct. "Damon, are you crazy?" The voice crackled. "Titanium Ventures is not just a firm. They are a ghost. We do not touch them. Nobody knows who runs it. They have no public face, no headquarters, just a web of shell companies and limitless capital. If they bought your debt, it is because they already own you. Do not drag the firm into this. We are cutting ties." The line went dead. Damon stared at the phone, his mouth slightly open. "A ghost." He whispered the word like a curse. He slammed the phone down onto the table with a primal scream of frustration. Damn it! Who are these people? How can nobody know who they are? Brittany, who had been pacing nervously by the fireplace, decided this was the moment to interject. "Babe, stop shouting," she whined, checking her reflection in the mirror. "You are stressing me out. And what about the Porsche? If they take the house, do they take the car too? Because I already posted it on my story, and it would be so embarrassing if I had to delete it." Damon spun around slowly. The look on his face made Brittany take a step back. His eyes were bloodshot and wild. "Are you serious right now?" He roared, his voice cracking. "We are about to lose $50 million. We are about to be homeless. And you are worried about your Instagram story. You are useless, Brittany. Absolutely useless. All you do is spend money and take pictures of yourself. Do you have any idea how much trouble we are in? Brittany gasped, tears instantly welling up in her eyes. How dare you talk to me like that? She sobbed. I am your wife. Damon laughed a cruel, hollow sound. You are a liability, he spat. Just shut up and let me think. He turned back to his phones, shaking his head, muttering to himself about ghosts and shell companies. He was terrifyingly close to the truth. The ghost he was afraid of was sitting 10 feet away wearing a Target sweater and drinking Earl Grey tea. Damon was pacing the floor like a caged tiger, muttering numbers and legal statutes under his breath. But my mother Pamela sat perfectly still. Her eyes, however, were darting around the room looking for a target. She needed somewhere to place this sudden, catastrophic failure, and she certainly was not going to place it on her golden son-in-law. Her gaze landed on me. I was sitting in the wingback chair by the window, quietly reading a paperback novel and sipping my tea. The calmness of my demeanor seemed to trigger something primal in her. It is you, she whispered. Her voice was low, but it carried across the room with terrifying clarity. I lowered my book slowly, marking my page with a finger. Excuse me, Mom? I asked. It is you, she repeated louder, this time standing up. You are the bad omen. You are the black cloud hanging over this family. Ever since you arrived in Aspen, everything has gone wrong. First the weather, then the mood, and now this. You brought this negative energy into our lives. She walked over to me, her hands shaking with rage. You are a jinx, Audrey. You always have been. Even when you were a child, things would break when you were around. Plans would fall apart. And now you sit here drinking tea while your sister's future is being destroyed. Do you not have a shred of empathy in your body? Or are you enjoying this? I looked at her steadily. It was fascinating to watch the mental gymnastics required to blame a global financial acquisition on a daughter wearing a sweater from Target. I took a deliberate sip of my Earl Grey, letting the bergamot settle on my tongue before answering. I failed to see how my presence caused a global investment firm to acquire a distressed asset portfolio, Mom. That seems like a matter of poor financial leverage and bad management, not bad vibes. Pamela's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. She snatched the book from my hands and threw it across the room. It hit the wall with a dull thud, damaging the spine. Stop talking about things you do not understand, she shrieked. You are poison, Audrey. You infect everything you touch. You are the reason your father died early because you stressed him out with your failures. And now you are the reason we are losing this house. The accusation about my father was a low blow even for her, but I did not flinch. I did not give her the satisfaction of a tear. I simply stood up, brushing an imaginary speck of dust from my pants. If my presence is so destructive, I will remove myself to the library, I said calmly. I would hate for my negative energy to interfere with your bankruptcy proceedings. I walked past Damon, who was too busy weeping into his hands to notice me. I climbed the stairs, listening to my mother screaming at the empty air. She called me a jinx. She called me a curse. She was wrong. I was not a jinx. I was karma. And I was just getting started. While my mother was busy cursing the universe upstairs, Brittany decided it was time for her to save the day. She wiped her tears and pulled a portable ring light out of her designer handbag. She set it up on the mantel above the fireplace, adjusting the brightness until it illuminated her tear-stained face perfectly. She believed that her 50,000 followers were a veritable army ready to march into battle for her. She tapped the record button, and her face instantly transformed from genuine misery to a practice performance of vulnerability. Hey guys, she whispered into her phone, her voice trembling just the right amount. I do not usually do this, but my family is going through a really hard time right now. We are being targeted by some really bad people who want to take away our legacy. I just started a GoFundMe page to help us fight back. Every little bit helps, even just $5. Please swipe up to donate and keep our dream alive. I watched from my chair, astounded by the sheer delusion. She was trying to crowdfund a $5 million corporate debt from teenagers who followed her for makeup tips. It was pathetic, but Damon's reaction was explosive. He had been on the phone with another rejection, but the word GoFundMe caught his ear like a gunshot. He crossed the room in 2 long strides and snatched the phone out of Brittany's hand. The ring light toppled over, crashing onto the stone hearth. Brittany shrieked, reaching for her device. What are you doing, Damon? I was recording. Damon stared at her, his face twisting with disbelief and rage. He looked at the screen where the donation page was already titled, Help the Wilson Family Keep Their Home. He tapped the delete button violently, his thumb hitting the screen hard enough to crack it. Are you insane? He shouted, throwing the phone onto the sofa. Do you have any brain cells left in that head of yours? You are begging strangers for money on the internet. I was trying to help, Brittany yelled back, her face flushing red. I have loyal followers, Damon. They love me. They would help us. Damon laughed, a harsh barking sound that had no humor in it. They do not love you, Brittany. They watch you because you are rich and pretty. If they find out we are broke, they will not send money. They will laugh at us. Do you want the whole world to know we are insolvent? Do you want Titanium Ventures to see this and know we are desperate? You are not saving our reputation. You are destroying it. He ran his hands through his hair, pulling at the roots. We are trying to negotiate a deal here. We need to look strong. We need to look like we have options. If they see you begging for $5 online, they will know we have nothing. You are making us look like a charity case. Brittany shrank back into the sofa cushions, clutching her phone to her chest. I just wanted to do something, she whimpered. Damon turned his back on her, unable to even look at his wife. Then do nothing, he snapped. Sit there and be quiet. That is the only way you can help right now. The room fell silent again, save for Brittany quiet sobbing. The great influencer had been silenced. The golden couple was cracking apart at the seams. And I just sat there, sipping my tea, watching the empire crumble one Instagram post at a time. The silence in the living room was thick enough to choke on. Damon sat with his head in his hands, the picture of a defeated man, while Brittany scrolled aimlessly through her phone, her earlier bravado completely extinguished. Pamela was staring out the window at the blizzard, her face a mask of bitter calculation. I decided it was time to gently nudge the dominoes I had set up. I cleared my throat softly, setting my teacup down on the saucer with a deliberate clink. You know, I said, keeping my tone light and hesitant. I read an article in the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago about firms like Titanium Ventures. They specialize in distressed assets, but their strategy is usually operational. They do not just want to strip assets, they want to turn them around. Damon lifted his head slowly, his eyes bloodshot and filled with irritation. What are you babbling about, Audrey? I am trying to save a company here. I do not need a book report. I ignored his tone and continued pressing the bait into the water. I am just saying I continued playing the part of the helpful naive sister. Since they are an investment firm, they probably do not have people on the ground here in Aspen. They do not know the local market or the staff or the vendors. Maybe they are looking for a local operating partner, someone to run the hotel for them while they manage the financials. If you approach them with a plan to stay on as management, maybe they would renegotiate the debt. I watched the idea land. I saw the flicker of hope in Pamela's eyes. But Damon's ego was a fortress that could not be breached by logic, especially when that logic came from me. He let out a harsh, derisive laugh. Oh my God, he groaned, rubbing his temples. Did you hear that, Pamela? Audrey thinks she understands high finance because she read one article. He turned to me, his expression dripping with condescension. Listen to me very carefully, Audrey. This is mergers and acquisitions. This is the big leagues. It is not running a lemonade stand or selling crafts on Etsy. Titanium Ventures does not want partners. They want blood. They are sharks, and sharks do not negotiate with the bait. But what if she is right? Pamela interjected, her survival instinct kicking in. What do we have to lose, Damon? If we offer our expertise, maybe they will let us keep a minority stake. We know the hotel better than anyone. Damon slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. Because it is a waste of time, Mom. And I do not have time to waste on fantasies cooked up by a medical school dropout. He glared at me, pointing a finger. Do us all a favor, Audrey. Imming and sit there. Let the adults handle the business. Go back to your coloring book or whatever it is you do all day. You know nothing about this world. I picked up my book again, hiding my face. I knew nothing about this world, he said. The irony was delicious. He was lecturing the architect about the design of the building. He was explaining the game to the person who wrote the rules. Fine, I murmured, retreating into silence. I was just trying to help. And I was helping. I was helping him dig his own grave exactly 6 feet deep. The shrill ring of the landline cut through the heavy silence like a fire alarm. We all jumped. Nobody used the landline in the chalet. It was a dusty relic sitting on an antique credenza in the hallway, primarily for emergencies. Damon stared at it for a second, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and anticipation. He scrambled out of his chair, knocking it over in his haste. It might be them, he whispered hoarsely, wiping his sweaty palms on his trousers. It has to be them. He snatched the receiver up before the third ring. Hello? This is Damon Wilson. He stood up straighter, instantly adopting his professional lawyer voice, though his voice cracked slightly on the last syllable. I watched from the living room as his expression shifted. The terror that had etched lines into his face began to smooth out, replaced by a look of confusion, and then slowly blooming relief. Yes, we are currently in residence. 4 p.m. We can make that work. Of course, we look forward to it. He hung up the phone and turned to face us. A slow grin spread across his face, the arrogance returning to his eyes like a light switch had been flipped. That was the executive assistant to the chairman of Titanium Ventures. They want to meet us. Face to face. Today, at 4 o'clock in the presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton, Pamela let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for an hour. "I knew it," she exclaimed, clapping her hands together. "I knew they would not just foreclose on a family like ours without a conversation. They realize the value of the Wilson name. They want to negotiate Damon. They probably want to keep us on as consultants to manage the transition. Or better yet, they might want to restructure the debt into a partnership." Brittany perked up immediately, reaching for her compact mirror to check her makeup. "The Ritz-Carlton," she mused. "That is a good sign. You do not invite people to the Ritz just to evict them. You invite them to sign deals." "Oh my God, do you think they want to put me on the board?" "I mean, I am the face of the brand." Damon nodded, pacing the room with renewed energy. "Exactly. This is standard M&A protocol. If they wanted to crush us, they would have just sent the lawyers. A face-to-face meeting with the chairman means they are interested in the human capital. They know we have the expertise to run those hotels. They need us." I sat in the corner listening to them weave a tapestry of delusion. It was fascinating and horrifying in equal measure. They were drowning men, convinced that the shark circling them was actually a dolphin coming to save them. They had no idea that the meeting was not a negotiation, it was a sentencing hearing. And the chairman they were so eager to impress was currently sitting 10 feet away wearing leggings and drinking tea. "Get ready, everyone," Pamela commanded, clapping her hands again. "I want us to look impeccable. Wear the Armani suits. Brittany, wear the pearls grandmother gave you. We need to show them that we are equals. We need to walk into that room like we own the place. Because after today, we just might own it again." I watched them scatter, running up the stairs to preen and polish themselves for their execution. They were so confident, so sure of their own importance. I took a sip of my tea. They were going to walk into the Ritz-Carlton like kings and queens, but they were going to crawl out like beggars. The atmosphere in the chalet shifted from panic to a frantic, orchestrated chaos. Damon had turned the library into a war room. The printer was humming rhythmically, spitting out page after page of graphs and spreadsheets. I stood in the doorway watching him collate the documents into leather-bound binders. He was moving with the manic energy of a man who believed he could bend reality to his will. I knew exactly what he was doing. I could see the file names on his laptop screen, adjusted EBITDA projections, asset evaluation models. He was cooking the books. He was preparing to walk into a meeting with a sophisticated institutional investor and present financial data that was at best optimistic and at worst criminal fraud. He looked up and saw me standing there. His eyes narrowed, assessing me not as a person but as a prop in his stage play. He reached behind his desk and grabbed a garment bag, tossing it at me. It landed at my feet with a soft thud. "Put this dress on," he commanded. "It is a black sheath dress, conservative, boring, invisible. I want you to look professional, but I do not want you to draw focus." I picked up the bag. "Why am I coming?" I asked. "I thought I was a jinx." Damon stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. "You are a jinx, Audrey, but you are also a Wilson, or at least you have the last name. We need to present a united front. Family businesses appeal to these private equity types. It makes us look stable, legacy-oriented. I want them to see 3 generations of Wilson standing together to save our heritage." He walked over to me, stopping just inside my personal space. He adjusted his cufflinks, looking down at me with a sneer. "But let us be very clear about your role today. You are not there to offer opinions. You are not there to ask questions. You are there to sit in the corner, take notes if asked, and pour water if the pictures run low. Essentially, you are a gloried secretary. Do you understand?" He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Don't say anything. Just smile and nod. If you open your mouth and ruin this deal, I will make sure you regret it for the rest of your miserable life. Now go get changed. We leave in 10 minutes. I took the dress and walked out of the library. As I turned the corner, I glanced back at the binder he had left open on the desk. The top page showed a projected revenue growth of 20% for the next quarter. It was a complete fabrication based on occupancy rates that the hotel had not seen since 2019. He was walking into a due diligence meeting with forged numbers. He thought he was preparing a weapon to defend his company. In reality, he was handing me the smoking gun. I went to my room to change. I would wear the black dress. I would play the part of the silent secretary. And I would watch him hang himself with his own lies. The blizzard had turned the world into a chaotic white void. As we stepped out of the chalet, the wind howled like a wounded animal, stinging my exposed skin, even through my coat. A black Cadillac Escalade was waiting in the driveway, its engine idling, sending plumes of exhaust into the freezing air. It looked like a hearse. Damon was already in a state of high agitation, barking orders at the driver to keep the heat running. He turned to me and shoved his heavy leather briefcase into my chest. It hit me with a thud, knocking the breath out of me. "Hold this," he commanded, his eyes wild. "And Do not put it on the floor, the heater vents might damage the bindings. Just hold it on your lap and do not wrinkle the documents inside. That is the future of this family you are holding. I gripped the handle, feeling the weight of his fraud in my hands. I climbed into the front passenger seat while Damon, Pamela, and Brittany piled into the back. The hierarchy was clear. They were the executives. I was the help. The car pulled away from the chalet, sliding slightly on the ice before the snow tires found purchase. Inside the vehicle, the atmosphere was suffocating. The smell of expensive leather mixed with the sharp metallic scent of fear coming from the back seat. Damon was rehearsing his pitch, muttering key phrases under his breath. Synergy. Operational excellence. Legacy branding. He sounded like a broken record trying to convince himself as much as the invisible investors. Pamela was checking her reflection in the rearview mirror, smoothing her hair. Do I look authoritative? She asked no one in particular. I want them to know they are dealing with a matriarch, not just a shareholder. You look perfect, Mom. Brittany chirped, though her voice was shaking. You look rich. That is all that matters, right? I sat silently in the front, staring out at the passing pine trees, which looked like ghosts in the snow. The briefcase was heavy on my knees. Underneath its bulk, I slid my phone out of my pocket. I kept it low, hidden from the rearview mirror. I opened the encrypted messaging app I used to communicate with my team. My thumb hovered over the screen. I could hear Damon in the back lecturing Brittany on how to shake hands properly. He was so busy trying to control the small details that he missed the avalanche coming straight for him. I typed a single sentence. The fish has taken the bait. I hit send. The message delivered instantly. A second later, a reply came back. The net is closing. See you in 20 minutes. I slid the phone back into my pocket and stared ahead at the winding road. We were driving toward the Ritz-Carlton, toward the luxury and the warmth. But for my family, we were driving straight into a slaughterhouse, and I was the one holding the knife. The transition from the biting cold of the blizzard to the hushed, golden warmth of the Ritz-Carlton lobby was jarring. We stepped inside, shaking the snow from our coats like commoners seeking shelter. The lobby was a cathedral of wealth with vaulted ceilings, crystal chandeliers, the size of small cars, and a fireplace that could roast a whole ox. Damon immediately straightened his spine, adjusting his suit jacket to hide the sweat stains that had formed during the car ride. He scanned the room, scanning for threats or opportunities. His eyes landed on a man standing near the concierge desk. A man in a bespoke navy suit, laughing with a bellhop. Damon froze. "Oh God," he whispered under his breath. "That is Julian from the Partners Committee. He cannot know I am here for a distressed debt meeting. He thinks I am skiing in Stod." Before Damon could retreat, Julian turned around and spotted us. His face lit up with recognition. "Damon Wilson," he boomed, walking over with his hand extended. "I thought that was you. What are you doing in Aspen? I thought you were strictly a Swiss Alps man." Damon put on his best courtroom smile, shaking Julian's hand vigorously. "Change of scenery. Julian, change of scenery. Brittany wanted to try the domestic slopes this year. You know how it is." Julian laughed, glancing at Brittany and Pamela. "Lovely to see you, ladies. You look radiant as always." Then his gaze shifted to me. I was standing slightly behind the group, struggling under the weight of Damon's heavy leather briefcase, and holding Brittany's fur coat, which she had thrust at me the moment we entered. I was wearing the plain black dress Damon had forced me into, and my hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Julian squinted slightly, trying to place me. "And who is this?" he asked politely. "Is this your sister-in-law? I believe we met briefly at the firm Christmas party a few years ago." Time seemed to stop. This was Damon's chance to show even a shred of decency, to acknowledge me as family. But I saw the calculation in his eyes. He was ashamed. He did not want a senior partner to know that his sister-in-law was the woman holding his bags like a pack mule. "No," Damon said quickly, his laugh nervous and high-pitched. "You are mistaken, Julian. This is Audrey. She is just our help. She travels with us to assist with the luggage and the heavy lifting. You know how hard it is to find good staff these days." Julian's expression cleared, and he nodded dismissively, losing all interest in me instantly. "Ah, I see. Well, good help is hard to find indeed." He turned his back to me, completely focusing his attention back on Damon. "We should grab a drink later, Damon. Catch up on the merger rumors." I stood there frozen. The briefcase felt like lead in my hands. The help. He had reduced my entire existence. My education, my blood relation to him, down to a servant role to protect his fragile ego. I looked at the back of Damon's head, at the sweat glistening on his neck. I did not cry. I did not protest. I simply tightened my grip on the handle of the briefcase. I stared at him, burning this moment into my memory. He had just disowned me in public. He had just severed the last possible thread of mercy I might have had for him. I shifted the weight of the bag. I was the help, all right? I was here to help him lose everything. The heavy brass doors of the elevator slid shut, sealing us inside a box of gold and velvet. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the cables lifting us toward the penthouse suite. The air in the confined space quickly became toxic with fear. Brittany was the first to crack. She was twisting the strap of her handbag so tight I thought it might snap. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, bordering on hyperventilation. "Damon, what if this goes wrong?" she whispered, her voice bouncing off the mirrored walls. "What if they do not want a partnership? What if they just want the money? We do not have $5 million. We do not even have 500,000. If they demand payment today, we are finished. I cannot lose the house, Damon. I cannot be poor. I do not know how to be poor." Damon stared at the floor, counting the numbers changing on the digital display. "Shut up, Brittany," he hissed through gritted teeth. "You are spiraling. We have a plan. We have the leverage of the Wilson brand. Leverage does not pay bills." Damon, Brittany cried out, her voice rising to a panic. "Cash pays bills. And we have none. What are we going to do if they ask for a down payment?" Before Damon could answer, Pamela spoke up. She was standing in the center of the elevator, checking her reflection one last time. She looked calm, composed, and utterly heartless. "If they want cash, we will give them cash," she stated simply. "We will liquidate the remaining assets." "What assets?" Brittany asked. "We mortgaged everything." "Not everything," Pamela replied, meeting Brittany's eyes in the mirror. "We still have the timber cabin on the lake, the one your father left to Audrey." I felt my blood turn to ice. I was standing in the corner, crushed under the weight of the luggage, pretending to be invisible, but I heard every word. That cabin was the only thing my father had left me specifically in his will. It was a small rundown shack where we used to fish together. It was where I felt safest. It was my sanctuary. "But Mom," Brittany whispered, glancing nervously in my direction, "that is Audrey Place. Dad left it to her. It is in her name." "So what?" Pamela scoffed, adjusting her pearl necklace. "She is part of this family, is she not? She eats our food. She stays in our houses. It is time she paid her dues. Besides, your father is dead. He does not know what we do with it. And frankly, Audrey does not need a vacation home. She is single, unemployed, and has no prospects. What use does she have for real estate? We will sell it. I already had it appraised last month. It should fetch enough to satisfy the initial demands of Titanium Ventures." I stood there, paralyzed. She had appraised my property behind my back. She had been planning this all along. To her, my memories, my inheritance, my legal rights meant absolutely nothing. I was just a resource to be harvested. I gripped the handle of the briefcase so hard my knuckles turned white. They were not just asking for help. They were planning to strip me bare. The elevator dinged, signaling our arrival at the penthouse. The doors opened, revealing a lavish hallway. Pamela stepped out first, head held high. "Come along, everyone," she commanded. "Let us go save our empire." I followed them, dragging their heavy bags. Yes, I thought. Let us go save the empire. Just not yours. We stood before the massive double doors of the presidential suite. They were made of dark, polished mahogany and looked like the gates to a fortress. Damon was wiping his sweaty palms on his trousers one last time, while Brittany checked her teeth in her compact mirror. I stood a few paces back, holding the briefcase, and the coats feeling less like a person and more like a piece of luggage. Just as Damon reached for the handle, Pamela reached out and grabbed his wrist. "Wait," she commanded. She turned slowly to face me. She looked me up and down, her eyes critical and cold. She reached out and straightened the collar of my cheap black dress, but it was not a gesture of affection. It was the way a manager fixes a crooked display before a health inspection. "Audrey, I want to make something very clear before we walk into this room," she said, her voice low and even. "We are about to close a deal that will elevate this family to a new level of wealth and influence. We will be global players." She took a step closer, invading my personal space. "And frankly, you do not fit into that future. A 33-year-old dropout with no ambition and no assets is not the image we want to project. So after this meeting concludes, after you have served your purpose today, I want you to leave. I want you to cut ties with us completely. Do not come to Christmas next year. Do not call us for money. Do not show up at the hotel expecting a free room. You are a liability, Audrey. And successful businesses do not keep liabilities on the books." The hallway was silent. Even Damon looked a little uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot, but he said nothing. He did not defend me. Brittany looked at the floor, checking her cuticles, avoiding my gaze. I looked at my mother. This was it. The final severance. She was throwing me away like garbage right before she walked into the room to beg for money. She was evicting her own daughter from the family to protect a reputation she had already lost. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The last lingering thread of guilt I had about what I was about to do snapped. It was gone, replaced by the cold, hard steel of resolve. I adjusted my grip on the briefcase containing the fraudulent documents Damon had prepared. "Understood," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I will go. I will not be a burden to this family ever again." Pamela nodded, satisfied with my submission. "Good," she said, turning back to the door. "At least you know your place. Now stand up straight and try to look presentable. Do not speak unless spoken to." She nodded to Damon. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and pushed the heavy doors open. We stepped across the threshold. They thought they were walking into a negotiation. They did not know they were walking into a courtroom, and the verdict had already been decided. The heavy doors swung open, revealing a conference room that smelled of old money and ruthless efficiency. The panoramic windows offered a breathtaking view of the snowstorm raging over the Rockies, but inside the air was still and sterile. At the center of the room sat a massive glass table. Two men in charcoal gray suits sat on one side, their hands folded over pristine legal pads. They did not stand up when we entered. They did not smile. They looked like undertakers waiting for a body. But it was the chair at the head of the table that drew every eye. It was a high-backed executive leather chair, and it was turned away from us facing the window. The person sitting in it was hidden completely from view, only a wisp of steam from a coffee cup rising above the headrest, suggesting a presence. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the click of Pamela's heels on the marble floor. Damon cleared his throat, adjusting his tie nervously. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "I am Damon Wilson. This is my mother-in-law, Pamela Wilson, and my wife, Brittany. We are the executive team behind the Wilson Hospitality Group." He gestured vaguely to me, standing in the back by the door. "And this is our assistant." The two lawyers nodded once in unison, but remained silent. They gestured to the empty chairs opposite them. We sat down. The leather was cold against my legs. I placed the heavy briefcase on the floor by my feet and folded my hands in my lap, assuming the posture of the obedient servant. I watched Damon try to fill the silence with his own importance. He opened his portfolio, pulling out the fraudulent spreadsheets I had seen earlier. "First of all, on behalf of the family, I would like to thank the chairman for seeing us on such short notice." Damon began, projecting his voice toward the back of the turned chair. "We understand that Titanium Ventures has acquired our debt portfolio. We see this not as a crisis, but as a unique opportunity for synergy. The Wilson brand is a staple of Aspen luxury. Our occupancy rates are projected to hit record highs next quarter despite the current economic downturn." He paused, waiting for a reaction. The chair did not move. The lawyers did not blink. Damon licked his lips, beads of sweat forming on his upper lip again. "I have prepared a comprehensive restructuring plan." He continued, his voice rising and pitched slightly. "It outlines how we can service the debt while maintaining operational control. We are willing to offer Titanium Ventures a minority equity stake in exchange for a refinancing of the principal. We believe this partnership will be highly lucrative for all parties involved." He was rambling now, throwing out buzzwords like confetti, synergy, value add, human capital. It was a desperate performance. He was trying to sell a sinking ship as a luxury yacht, and the person in the chair knew exactly where the holes were. I watched the steam rise from the coffee cup behind the chair. It was Earl Grey, the same tea I drank every morning. The trap was set. The mouse had walked in and started nibbling on the cheese. Now it was time to snap the trap shut. Damon was mid-sentence talking about Q3 projections when the lawyer on the left simply raised a hand. It was a small gesture, but it had the stopping power of a freight train. Damon's mouth snapped shut, his words dying in his throat. "Mr. Wilson?" the lawyer said, his voice dry as dust. "Please stop. We are not here to listen to a sales pitch. We have already conducted our due diligence." He slid a thin black folder across the glass table. It stopped inches from Damon shaking hands. "We have reviewed your operating costs, your occupancy rates, and your debt service coverage ratio. The numbers you are presenting today are optimistic at best, fraudulent at worst." Damon's face turned a sickly shade of gray. "But those are just projections," he stammered, trying to regain his footing. "The market is rebounding. We just need time for the capital improvements to yield returns." The lawyer did not blink. "We do not deal in projections, Mr. Wilson. We deal in liquidity, and the fact is you have none. You are operating at a 40% deficit. Your credit lines are maxed out. You are not just distressed. You are insolvent." The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Insolvent. It meant broke. It meant dead. Pamela gasped, clutching her pearls. "That is a lie," she hissed. "The Wilson name is worth millions. We have goodwill in this community." The second lawyer spoke up, his tone even colder than the first. "Brand equity does not pay the mortgage, Mrs. Wilson. We are not interested in your name or your legacy. We are interested in the $5 million you owe us. And since you clearly do not have the cash, we are moving forward with asset seizure. Seizure, Brittany squeaked. You mean like taking our stuff? Precisely, the lawyer replied. The hotel, the commercial properties, and the private residence in Aspen. The deed to the chalet was used as collateral for your last bridge loan, was it not? Damon nodded slowly, looking like he might vomit. He had leveraged the roof over their heads to fund his bad decisions. Then we will be taking possession of that as well, effective at 5 p.m. today. You have 45 minutes to vacate the premises. Damon stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the marble. You cannot do that, he shouted, losing all composure. We have rights. We need time to restructure. Please just let me speak to the chairman. He gestured frantically at the high-backed chair still turned away from us. Surely he understands that businesses go through rough patches. I can explain everything to him. I can make him see the value here. The lawyer smiled, a thin, humorless expression. The chairman has heard enough, he said. And the chairman's decision is final. There will be no restructuring. There will be no partnership. There is only the debt. And it is due now. Damon slumped back into his chair, defeated. He looked at Pamela, then at Brittany. They were staring at him with wide, terrified eyes, waiting for a miracle he could not provide. The room was silent again, except for the howling wind outside. They were finished. They had walked in as royalty, and they were being thrown out as trespassers. And still, the chair did not turn. The silence that followed the lawyer pronouncement was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Damon's face was a mask of sheer terror, his eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit or a weapon. He looked at the window at the door, and then finally his gaze landed on me. I was standing in the corner holding a crystal pitcher of water, my knuckles white against the handle. I saw the gears turning in his head. I saw the exact moment survival instinct overrode every shred of morality he had left. Wait! Damon shouted, his voice cracking. He scrambled to his feet, leaning over the table. We have other assets. We have collateral that was not listed in the initial disclosure. The lawyer raised an eyebrow but did not speak. Damon pointed a trembling finger directly at me. Her? My sister-in-law. Audrey. Brittany gasped, but Pamela remained stone-faced, watching Damon play his final card. She has a trust fund. Damon continued, the word spilling out of him in a rush. $200,000 in liquid cash and real estate. A cabin on the lake. It is unencumbered, fully paid off. It is prime waterfront property that has to be worth another $300,000 or $400,000. He fumbled with his briefcase, ripping the zipper open in his haste. I have the documents right here. A full power of attorney signed yesterday. It grants me total control over her assets to use for the benefit of the family business. He pulled out the crumpled papers I had signed with a scribble the night before and slammed them onto the glass table. Take it all. Just give us an extension on the hotel. The lawyer picked up the papers, holding them by the corner as if they were contaminated. You are offering your sister-in-law personal inheritance to cover a corporate debt, Mr. Wilson, without her present consent. She does not need to consent. Damon snapped, his desperation turning into aggression. I am her legal guardian effective yesterday. She is mentally unfit to manage her own finances. That is why she is just standing there. She does whatever I tell her to do. He turned to me, his eyes pleading and threatening at the same time. Tell them, Audrey. Tell them you want to help the family. Nod your head. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had bullied me, belittled me, and now was trying to sell my future to save his own skin. He was willing to leave me destitute, homeless, and labeled mentally incompetent just to keep his status for another month. The cruelty was breathtaking. I tightened my grip on the pitcher. Then, slowly, deliberately, I set it down on the side table. The clink of crystal against wood rang out clearly in the room. I did not nod. I did not look down. I straightened my spine, shaking out the tension in my shoulders. I stepped out of the shadows and walked toward the empty chair at the head of the table. Damon's eyes widened in confusion. What are you doing? He hissed. Sit down. You are embarrassing us. I ignored him. I walked past the lawyers, who lowered their heads in respect as I passed. I walked past my mother, whose jaw was beginning to drop. I walked straight to the high-backed leather chair, the chair of the chairman, the chair of the person who owned their debt. And I stood behind it, my hand resting on the leather headrest. I stood behind the massive leather chair, my hand resting on the headrest. The leather was cool and smooth under my palm. For years I had been the invisible daughter, the disappointment, the failure. I had fetched their coffee, cleaned their messes, and absorbed their insults like a sponge. But in that moment, standing at the head of the table, the weight of their judgment simply evaporated. I was no longer Audrey the dropout. I was the CEO of Titanium Ventures. And I was done hiding. Damon stared at me, his mouth agape. Confusion roared with fury on his face. What the hell do you think you are doing? He barked, his voice echoing off the glass walls. Get away from there. That is the chairman's seat. You are going to get us thrown out before we even start. He looked at the lawyers pleadingly. I apologize for her behavior, gentlemen. She is obviously having an episode. Audrey, get back in the corner right now. Pick up the water pitcher and do your job. I ignored him completely. I smoothed the front of my cheap black dress. It was a garment intended to make me look like a servant, but now with my shoulders back and my chin high, it looked like battle armor. I walked around the side of the chair. The two lawyers who had been stone-faced throughout Damon's desperate pitch immediately stood up. They buttoned their jackets and bowed their heads slightly in deferential silence. It was a subtle gesture, but to a trained eye it screamed authority. Damon, however, was too blinded by his own panic to notice. Brittany let out a high-pitched, nervous giggle. Audrey, stop it, she hissed. You are embarrassing us. Mom, tell her to stop. Pamela glared at me, her eyes narrowing. Audrey, get down from there this instant, she commanded. You are making a fool of yourself. Do you want to be disowned right here in front of strangers? I looked at them one last time. My mother, my sister, my brother-in-law. They looked so small from where I was standing, so petty. I pulled the chair out. The wheels glided silently over the plush carpet. I sat down. The leather creaked softly as I settled into the seat. I placed my elbows on the glass table and interlaced my fingers, staring directly into Damon's eyes. The room went deathly quiet. Damon's face went from red to white in the span of a heartbeat. He looked at me, then at the lawyers who were still standing waiting for my signal, then back at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back, slightly gripping the edge of the table for support. I think you are mistaken, Damon. I said, my voice calm and ice cold. Your place is on the other side of the negotiating table. This seat is taken. The silence stretched until it hummed. Damon was staring at me like I had grown a second head. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land, but no sound came out. It was Brittany who finally broke the spell. She let out a short, high-pitched giggle that sounded more like a hiccup. She looked around the room, searching for someone to share the joke with. But nobody was laughing. Audrey, seriously, stop it. She squeaked nervously, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. You are acting weird. This is not the time for one of your little protests against capitalism or whatever this is. Get up. You are wrinkling the leather. She looked at the lawyers, flashing them a bright, apologetic smile that looked painted on. I am so sorry about her. She is a little unstable. We are handling it. Just give us a second to get her under control. Pamela stepped forward, her face tight with suppressed rage. She reached out as if to grab my arm, but stopped short when one of the lawyers shifted his stance, blocking her path. Audrey, get up this instant, she hissed. You have humiliated us enough. Do you want to be arrested for trespassing? Get back to the corner and pour the water before I call security myself. You are ruining everything. I did not move. I did not even blink. I simply leaned back in the chair, interlacing my fingers on the cool glass surface of the table. I looked at my family standing there in their expensive clothes, looking small and pathetic. For the first time in my life, I was not looking up at them. I was looking down. They were shouting orders at a ghost, at a version of me that no longer existed. I turned my gaze to the man on my right, ignoring my mother completely. Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice steady and authoritative. Is the paperwork in order? The lawyer straightened his tie and turned his body toward me, ignoring Damon and Pamela as if they were furniture. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of genuine respect that he had never shown Damon. Yes, Madam Chairman, he replied clearly, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. The asset liquidation files are ready for your signature. We have also prepared the eviction notices as you instructed. The security team is on standby in the lobby to escort the previous owners off the premises once the meeting is concluded. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Madam Chairman. Brittany's smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of slack-jawed horror. Pamela froze, her hands still outstretched in midair, her eyes widening until they looked like they might pop out of her skull. But it was Damon who had the most violent reaction. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. He took a staggering step back, bumping into the wall. Chairman, he whispered, the words strangling him. You, it is you. You are Titanium Ventures. He looked at me with a mixture of terror and disbelief. But you are broke. You drive a Honda. You wear clothes from Target. How is this possible? I picked up the heavy crystal glass of water I had poured for myself earlier. I took a slow, deliberate sip. I watched the realization wash over them. The fear, the comprehension that the monster they were running from was the same girl they had been stepping on for years. I set the glass down. It is amazing what you can save when you are not buying designer purses and leasing sports cars. Damon, I said softly. Now sit down. We have business to discuss. I reached into the leather folder on the desk and pulled out a small silver remote. With a single click, the automated blinds descended, blocking out the storm and plunging the room into semi-darkness. Another click and the massive screen behind me roared to life. The Titanium Ventures logo appeared, a stylized T that Damon had been having nightmares about for weeks. But underneath it, in bold sans serif font, was a name that made the air leave the room. Audrey Wilson, founder and CEO. I watched their faces in the blue glow of the projector. It was a masterpiece of cognitive dissonance. They were looking at the truth, but their brains refused to process it. To them, I was the failure, the medical school dropout, the charity case. They could not reconcile that image with the woman who controlled a billion-dollar portfolio. You thought I dropped out of medical school because I could not handle the pressure, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. I dropped out because I was bored. I was trading distressed equities during anatomy lectures and making more in a week than a surgeon makes in a year. I realized that saving lives was noble, but saving companies was profitable. I clicked the remote again. A timeline appeared showing a series of aggressive acquisitions over the last 5 years. Manufacturing plants in Ohio, tech startups in Silicon Valley, and now a failing hospitality group in Aspen. I specialize in identifying incompetence. I continued standing up and walking slowly around the table. I find companies with good bones but bad leadership. I buy their debt, I strip their assets, and I rebuild them properly. Damon was shaking his head, muttering no over and over again. But how he whispered, "We never saw you working. You were always sketching in that stupid book." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "That stupid book was my acquisition ledger, Damon. While you were bragging about your connections at the country club, I was analyzing your balance sheets. While you were leasing cars, you could not afford to impress people you do not like. I was building an empire in the shadows." I stopped in front of Brittany, who was clutching her designer handbag like a shield. She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes, finally understanding the magnitude of her mistake. "You asked me yesterday why I do not have nice things, Brittany. You mocked my clothes. You mocked my life. But here is the reality. Wealth screams, but power whispers. While you were busy buying handbags and posting selfies, I was busy buying your debt. And now I own everything. The house, the hotel, the cars, even the chair you were sitting in." The silence in the conference room was so profound that I could hear the hum of the air conditioning system and the rhythmic tapping of the snow against the panoramic glass. The projection screen behind me cast a cool blue light over the room, illuminating the faces of my family. They looked like statues frozen in a tableau of absolute shock. Damon's mouth was still slightly open, his eyes fixed on the logo of Titanium Ventures. Pamela was clutching her chest as if she were having palpitations, while Brittany simply stared at me with the vacant expression of a child who has just been told Santa Claus is not real. I turned away from the screen and walked slowly back to the corner of the room where I had left my battered leather backpack. The same backpack Brittany had dumped on the floor the night before. The same backpack they had ridiculed for being old and out of fashion. I knelt down, unzipping the main compartment. My movements were slow and deliberate. I wanted them to watch every second of this. I wanted the anticipation to be as suffocating as the realization. I reached inside and pulled out the small black box tied with a simple red ribbon. It was the gift I had brought to the chalet 3 days ago. The gift Pamela had dismissed as cheap cookies from the airport duty-free shop. The gift that had been sitting on the mantelpiece, ignored and unopened while they drank champagne and planned their spa treatments. I stood up, holding the box in both hands. It felt heavy, solid. I walked back to the glass table, my heels clicking softly on the marble floor. The sound was sharp, like a gavel striking a block. I placed the box in the center of the table, right in front of Damon. The black cardboard absorbed the light, looking like a void in the middle of the gleaming surface. "You never did open your Christmas present," I said, my voice soft, but carrying to every corner of the room. "You were too busy complaining about the wrapping paper. You were too busy telling me how embarrassed you were by my presence. You assumed it was something worthless because you assumed I was worthless." Damon looked down at the box. His hands were trembling so violently that they shook the table slightly. "What is this?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Is this, a joke? Is there a bomb in there?" I smiled. A cold, humorless smile. In a manner of speaking, yes, but not the kind that explodes with fire. The kind that explodes with ink. I reached out and pulled the red ribbon. The knot came undone with a soft whisper of silk. I lifted the lid. There were no cookies inside. There was no chocolate. There was no cheap trinket. Inside, resting on a bed of black velvet, was a single folded document. It was printed on heavy cream-colored bond paper with a gold foil seal at the bottom. The seal of the state of Delaware. I picked up the document and unfolded it. The paper crinkled loudly in the silent room. I turned it around and slid it across the glass until it rested directly under Damon's nose. "Read it," I commanded. Damon looked down. His eyes scanned the header, and I saw the color drain from his face until he looked like a sheet of paper himself. He read the words, but his brain seemed unable to process them. Certificate of share ownership. He read aloud, his voice shaking. Wilson Hospitality Group. Class A, voting stock. He looked up at me, confusion, warring with terror in his eyes. I do not understand. This says 60%. This says Titanium Ventures owns 60% of the company. I leaned forward, resting my knuckles on the table. It is a debt-to-equity conversion, Damon. It is a standard clause in the distressed asset contracts you signed without reading. When a borrower defaults on a loan of this magnitude and fails to demonstrate liquidity within 24 hours, the lender has the right to convert the outstanding debt into equity at a valuation of their choosing. Since your company is currently technically insolvent, I valued your shares at pennies on the dollar. I paused, letting the math sink in. I bought your debt for $5 million. And in exchange, I exercised my right to convert that debt into a controlling interest in your family business. I did not just buy your loan, Damon. I bought you. Pamela let out a strangled cry. You cannot do that, she shrieked, finding her voice at last. This is a family company. Your father built this. You cannot just steal it. I turned to her, my gaze hard. I did not steal it, Mother. I saved it. You were driving this company off a cliff. You were spending money. You did not have leveraging assets. You did not own and lying to your investors. If I had not stepped in, the bank would have foreclosed next week. They would have sold the hotel for parts. They would have fired the staff. They would have erased the Wilson name from Aspen entirely. I pointed a finger at the document. This piece of paper is the only reason you still have a roof over your heads right now. But make no mistake, it is my roof. It is my hotel. And from this moment on, you work for me. Brittany looked between us, her eyes wide. So wait, she stammered. Does this mean we are still rich? Or are we poor? I am so confused. Damon slammed his hand on the table, making Brittany jump. We are nothing, Brittany. He roared, his control finally snapping. She owns 51%. She owns the board. She can fire us. She can liquidate us. She can do whatever she wants. He turned to me. His face twisted with hatred. You planned this. You planned this whole thing. The silence. The sketchbook. The cheap clothes. You wanted to humiliate us. I picked up the black box and closed the lid. I did not plan for you to be incompetent, Damon. I did not plan for you to be cruel. That was all you. I just provided the capital. And as for the humiliation you did that to yourselves, you spent years treating me like I was invisible. You thought I was weak because I was kind. You thought I was stupid because I was quiet. You never stopped to think that maybe I was just watching, learning, waiting. I looked at the lawyers who were watching the scene with professional detachment. Mr. Sterling, please record the transfer of shares in the official minutes. And please note that the former CEO, Damon Wilson, has been relieved of his duties effective immediately due to gross mismanagement and attempted fraud. Damon jaw dropped. You cannot fire me, he sputtered. I am the family. I looked him dead in the eye. Not anymore. In business, there is no family. There are only shareholders. And the majority shareholder has just spoken. Pack your things, Damon. You have 10 minutes to clear your desk before security escorts you out. And take the black box with you. Consider it a severance package. It is the most expensive gift you will ever receive. I watched them crumble. The arrogance, the pride, the entitlement, it all turned to dust in the face of that single piece of paper. They had opened the box expecting a treat and found a guillotine, and I was the one holding the rope. The air in the conference room had turned brittle enough to snap. Damon stood by the glass table, staring down at the share certificate that had just ended his career. His face was a map of ruin. The arrogance that had defined him for the last decade had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, desperate man who realized he was standing on a trap door that had already opened. I sat back in the leather chair watching him unravel. It was not a pleasant sight, but it was a necessary one. Mr. Sterling, I said, breaking the silence. Please note for the official record that Damon Wilson is hereby terminated from his position as CEO of Wilson Hospitality Group, effective immediately. The cause is gross negligence, fiduciary irresponsibility, and embezzlement. His access to all company accounts and properties is to be revoked within the hour. The lawyer nodded, his pen scratching across the legal pad with a sound that was louder than a scream. Damon had snapped up. Embezzlement, he choked out the word. You cannot prove that. I made bad business decisions, Audrey. Everyone makes bad decisions. That is not a crime. You cannot fire me for trying to save the company. I am the only one who knows how this place runs. If you fire me, the staff will walk. The vendors will cancel contracts. You need me. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the polished mahogany. I do not need you, Damon. I said, my voice low and steady. I need a CEO who does not treat the company operating account like a personal piggy bank. And as for proof, I think it is time we looked at the screen again. I picked up the silver remote and clicked it. The slide on the projector changed. Gone was the timeline of Titanium Ventures acquisitions. In its place was a detailed spreadsheet of bank transfers dating back 18 months. Rows of numbers glowed in the dim light. Each line represented a transfer of funds from the hotel maintenance budget to a shell company called Sapphire Consulting, LLC. Brittany squinted at the screen, wiping her tear-stained face. Sapphire Consulting, she whispered. Who are they? We do not use consultants. Damon stiffened. His body went rigid, as if he had been electrocuted. Turn it off, he shouted, lunging toward the remote on the table. Turn it off right now. This is private corporate data. I moved the remote out of his reach. It is not private, Damon, I said coldly. It is company data. And since I own the company, it is my data. I looked at Brittany. You have been complaining for months that Damon has been stressed, that money was tight, that he was working late nights at the office to fix the books. You thought he was a martyr for the family business. I clicked the remote again. A new image appeared. It was a lease agreement for a luxury penthouse in downtown Denver. Next to it were credit card statements highlighting purchases at Cartier Tiffany and a Porsche dealership, all paid for by Sapphire Consulting, LLC. I turned to my sister. Look at the signature on the lease, Brittany. Look at the name of the tenant. It is not Damon. It is a woman named Vanessa. And those consulting fees totaling nearly $400,000 over the last year went directly into her bank account. That is why the hotel is bankrupt. That is why you could not afford the spa yesterday. Damon was not losing money to the market. He was spending it on his mistress. The sound that came out of Brittany was not a scream. It was a broken, jagged inhale, like someone had punched her in the gut. She stared at the screen, her eyes wide and unblinking. The Cartier bracelet on the receipt. She whispered the words. He told me he could not afford to get me anything for our anniversary. He told me we had to sacrifice. She looked at Damon slowly. You bought her a bracelet. You bought her a car. Damon was shaking his head frantically, sweat flying from his face. No, Brittany, listen to me. Audrey is twisting this. It is a business arrangement. Vanessa is a legitimate contractor. She handles logistics. It is complicated. You would not understand. Brittany stood up. Her legs were shaking so badly she had to hold on to the table. I understand perfectly, she said, her voice rising to a shriek. You stole from us. You stole my inheritance. You stole our home. And you gave it to some woman in Denver while I was clipping coupons and begging my followers for $5. You are not just a failure, Damon. You are a monster. She picked up her glass of water and threw the contents in his face. The water splashed over his expensive suit, soaking his shirt and dripping down his nose. He stood there stunned, blinking the water out of his eyes. The room was silent, save for Brittany sobbing. Pamela had sunk into a chair, her hand over her mouth, staring at the floor, unable to even look at her son-in-law. It is over, Damon, I said calmly. I have already forwarded this file to the district attorney. You are not just fired. You are facing criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. You are going to prison. That was the breaking point. The realization that he had lost everything, his job, his wife, his freedom, snapped something inside him. He let out a roar of pure primal rage. His face twisted into a mask of hatred. He did not look at Brittany or Pamela. He looked only at me, the cause of his destruction. You bitch, he screamed. You ruined everything. I will kill you. He launched himself across the table. He moved faster than I expected, scrambling over the glass surface, scattering papers and overturning the pitcher of water. His hands were clawed, reaching for my throat. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, filled with murderous intent. I did not move. I did not flinch. I simply sat there watching him come. Before his fingers could graze my skin, two large shadows detached themselves from the wall near the door. The security team I had stationed in the room moved with terrifying efficiency. One guard caught Damon by the back of his suit jacket, yanking him backward with enough force to lift him off his feet. The other grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back until Damon howled in pain. They slammed him face first onto the carpet. The sound of his body hitting the floor echoed in the room. Get off me! He screamed, kicking and thrashing like a wild animal. Do you know who I am? I am Damon Wilson. I own this town. I stood up slowly and walked around the table until I was standing over him. The guards held him pinned to the floor, his face pressed against the wool carpet. I looked down at him. You are nobody, Damon, I said softly. You are a trespasser in my building, and you are trespassing on my time. I looked up at the guards. Get him out of here. Hand him over to the police waiting in the lobby, and make sure he does not take anything with him, not even the pen. The guards hauled him to his feet. His suit was ruined. His hair was a mess, and his nose was bleeding from hitting the floor. He looked at me one last time, his eyes filled with fear and loathing. "This is not over, Audrey." He spat blood, flicking his lips. "I will sue you. I will destroy you." I sat back down in the chairman chair and turned my attention to the paperwork. "It is over, Damon," I said, without looking up. "You just do not know it yet. Now get out." They dragged him toward the door. He was still screaming, cursing my name, and begging Brittany to help him, but she just turned away, burying her face in her hands. The heavy mahogany door slammed shut, cutting off his voice. The silence returned to the room. But it was different now. It was the silence of a battlefield after the cannon fire has stopped. The enemy was defeated. The castle was taken, and the queen was finally on her throne. With Damon screaming echoing down the corridor and fading into silence, the atmosphere in the conference room shifted instantly. The violent energy dissipated, replaced by a pathetic, desperate vacuum. Pamela, who had been slumped in her chair watching her son-in-law being dragged away, suddenly straightened her spine. She pulled a lace handkerchief from her sleeve and dabbed at dry eyes. She looked at me, not with fear like Brittany, but with a calculated, tragic expression. She was switching roles. The imperious matriarch was gone. The long-suffering mother had arrived. "Audrey," she began, her voice trembling with a practiced fragility, "you have to understand. I had no choice. Damon was out of control. I was just trying to keep the peace. I was trying to hold this family together after your father passed." She took a step toward the head of the table. Her hands clasped in supplication. "Everything I did for the family. I did it for you and your sister." A mother has to make hard choices to protect her children's heritage. I watched her performance with the same detachment one might watch a bad soap opera. She was good. I had to give her that. She almost sounded convincing. But I had the receipts. I had the years of neglect, the insults, the emotional manipulation stored in my memory like data on a hard drive. "Stop," I said. The single word cut through her monologue like a knife. "Do not come any closer. And do not insult my intelligence by pretending you were a victim. You were not a bystander, Pamela. You were the architect. You encouraged Damon spending. You appraised my cabin behind my back. You were ready to sell my father's legacy to buy yourself another season of galas and champagne." Pamela froze her mask, slipping slightly. "But I am your mother," she whispered. "You cannot leave me destitute. You cannot throw me out into the snow. Think of what people will say." I leaned back in the leather chair, tapping my pen against the glass table. "You are right," I said. "I am not a monster. I do not believe in leaving family on the street regardless of how toxic they are. I have made arrangements for you." Hope flared in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought she could manipulate her way back into comfort. "Thank you, darling," she breathed. "I knew you had a good heart. I can stay at the chalet then." I shook my head slowly. "No, the chalet is a company asset, and it is being liquidated to cover the debts you incurred. You are moving to a facility I have selected. It is called Pine View Gardens." Pamela frowned. "Pine View? I do not know that one. Is it near the St. Regis?" I suppressed a cold smile. "No, Mother. It is in the valley. It is a state-licensed elder care facility. It is clean. It is safe. And it is average. Strictly average. You will have a semi-private room, which means you will have a roommate. Meals are provided in the cafeteria at set times. Lights out is at 9. Pamela's face went pale. "A roommate," she gasped. "A cafeteria. Audrey? You cannot be serious. That sounds like a prison." "It is not a prison," I corrected. "It is reality. It is the life you can afford with zero assets and no income. I have prepaid your residency for 1 year. After that, you will have to rely on Social Security." "But my lifestyle," she stammered. "I need my treatments. I need my allowance." I opened the folder in front of me and pulled out a check copy from 2 years ago. "Do you remember this?" I asked, holding it up. "When I lost my apartment and asked you for a loan, you sent me a check for $400. You told me that was all I was worth. You told me to make it stretch. You told me that beggars cannot be choosers." I dropped the paper on the table. "That is your monthly stipend at the facility, Mother. $400? That will cover your toiletries and perhaps a bingo night or two. I suggest you learn how to budget. It is a skill you should have learned 40 years ago." Pamela stared at me, her mouth opening and closing in shock. She looked at the luxury of the Ritz-Carlton room, and then at the cold, hard face of the daughter she had undervalued. She realized finally that the balance sheet had been corrected. She was worth exactly what she had decided I was worth. $400. With Pamela sobbing quietly into her hands, I turned my attention to the last person remaining in the room. Brittany was standing by the window, staring out at the blizzard. She looked like a doll that had been dropped and broken. Her mascara was running in dark streaks down her cheeks, and she was clutching her designer handbag, as if it contained the secrets of the universe. She was the one who had mocked my clothes the loudest. She was the one who had shredded my sketchbook. And now she was the one with the most to lose. "Brittany," I said, my voice cutting through her daze. "The keys." I held out my hand, palm up. She blinked at me, confused. "Keys," she repeated stupidly. "Keys to what?" "The house." "You already said you were taking the house." "The car, Brittany," the first clarified. "The Porsche Cayenne parked with the valet downstairs. The one you have been posting on Instagram all week with the caption blessed. It is a company vehicle. It was purchased with funds embezzled from the hotel maintenance budget. Legally, it belongs to Titanium Ventures, and by extension, it belongs to me." Brittany clutched her bag tighter, stepping back. "No," she whimpered. "You cannot take my car. How am I supposed to get home? How am I supposed to pick up Leo from the nanny? You cannot leave me stranded in a snowstorm." I did not lower my hand. "I am not leaving you stranded. I have arranged for a shuttle to take you and Leo to a motel near the airport. But the Porsche stays here. It is a $50,000 asset, and I intend to liquidate it to recoup some of the losses your husband caused. Now give me the keys." She stared at me, her lower lip trembling. Then, with a sudden burst of defiance, she shook her head. "No, it is my car. Damon gave it to me for my birthday. It has my name on the registration." Mr. Sterling stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Actually, Mrs. Wilson, the registration is in the name of Sapphire Consulting LLC, the same shell company your husband used to pay his mistress. Technically, you have been driving a stolen vehicle for 6 months." The color drained from Brittany's face, leaving her looking sickly and gray. She looked down at the keys in her hand as if they had turned into snakes. Her husband had bought her a car with the same money he used to betray her. The symbol of her status was actually a symbol of her humiliation. She dropped the keys onto the glass table. They landed with a heavy clatter next to the black box. "Fine," she whispered, tears spilling over again. "Take the car. Take it all. I am leaving. I am going to book a flight to Cabo. I need to get away from this family. I need to think." She turned to leave, reaching into her bag for her wallet. I watched her pull out her Platinum American Express card. The card she used to buy $300 lunches and designer shoes. The card that had never been declined in her life. "I would not bother with that if I were you, Brittany," I said softly. She froze, card in hand. "Why not?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Because that card is linked to the corporate account," I continued. "The same account I just froze. Mr. Sterling contacted American Express 10 minutes ago. Your credit limit is 0. Your bank accounts have been locked pending the forensic audit of Damon fraud. You have no access to cash, no access to credit. You are completely insolvent." Brittany looked at the card, then at me. "But I have nothing," she gasped. "I have no money. I have no car. My husband is going to prison. My house is being seized. What am I supposed to do?" I looked at her, the sister who had never worked a day in her life. The influencer who thought taking selfies was a career. "You are going to have to do what the rest of the world does, Brittany," I said. "You are going to have to get a job. Real work. Maybe you can start by returning those shoes. They should cover your rent for a month if you are lucky." Brittany sank to her knees on the plush carpet, finally understanding the magnitude of her ruin. The facade was gone. The filter was removed. She was just a woman with a cheating husband and a mountain of debt alone in the cold. Mr. Sterling slid the final document across the glass table. It was the deed transfer for the Wilson Hospitality Group, along with the foreclosure authorization for the private residence. The paper made a dry hissing sound against the polished surface like a snake striking. I picked up the heavy gold Mont Blanc pen. The same pen Damon had tried to force into my hand just 24 hours ago to steal my trust fund. The irony was perfect. I was using his own weapon to sign his execution order. I pressed the nib to the paper. The ink flowed smoothly, dark and permanent. I signed my name, Audrey Wilson, CEO, Titanium Ventures. With that single signature, the transfer was complete. The hotel, the house, the cars, and the legacy were legally mine. I capped the pen and set it down next to the black box. It made a sharp click that echoed in the silent room. "It is done," Mr. Sterling said, collecting the papers with efficient movements. He placed them in his briefcase and snapped the lock shut. "Do you have any further instructions for the previous owners?" I stood up, smoothing the skirt of my black dress. I looked at the remnants of my family one last time. Pamela was slumped in her chair, staring blankly at the wall, her face aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Brittany was still on the floor, clutching her useless credit card like a talisman. They looked small. They looked finite. "No," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. "They have until 5 p.m. to vacate the premises. After that, change the locks and activate the security system." If they are found on the property, treat them as trespassers. I turned my back on them. I did not say goodbye. You do not say goodbye to a tumor after it has been removed. You simply walk away and let the healing begin. I walked toward the heavy mahogany doors. Mr. Sterling opened one for me, and I stepped out into the corridor, leaving the suffocating air of the conference room behind. The walk to the elevator felt different. My footsteps were lighter, the burden of their judgment, the weight of being the disappointment, the shame of being the black sheep. It was all gone. I pressed the button for the lobby. The doors slid open, and I stepped inside alone. As I descended the 50 floors, I checked my reflection in the mirrored walls. I did not see a victim. I saw a victor. The lobby of the Ritz-Carlton was bustling with guests seeking shelter from the storm. But as I stepped out of the elevator, the general manager hurried over. He had been briefed. "Miss Wilson," he said, bowing slightly, "your car is waiting at the main entrance. The valet has already brought it around." "Thank you," I replied, pulling on my coat. I walked through the revolving doors and into the biting cold of the Aspen afternoon. The wind whipped my hair, but I did not feel the chill. Parked right in front of the entrance engine, idling with a low, powerful purr, was not a Honda. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom jet black with tinted windows. The Spirit of Ecstasy hood ornament gleamed against the white snow. The valet opened the rear door. I slid into the back seat, sinking into the hand-stitched leather. The warmth enveloped me instantly. My driver, a massive man named Cole, looked at me in the rearview mirror. "To the airport, Miss Wilson," he asked. "The private jet is fueled and ready for takeoff." I looked out the window at the hotel rising above me. Somewhere on the top floor, my mother and sister were packing their bags, preparing to enter a world of mediocrity they had always despised. They had spent their lives calling me the black sheep. They thought I was the outcast, the weak link. They never realized that the black sheep is often just a wolf in waiting. "To the airport, Cole," I said, settling back into the seat. "We have a new acquisition in Tokyo to discuss." The car pulled away from the curb, moving silently and powerfully through the snow, leaving the Ritz-Carlton and the Wilson family in the rearview mirror. I watched them disappear into the whiteout until there was nothing left but the road ahead. The screen faded to black. The story of Audrey Wilson offers a brutal but necessary masterclass in the difference between perceived status and actual power. The Wilson family's downfall was not just financial. It was a failure of perception. They were so obsessed with the aesthetics of wealth, the brands, the parties, the social hierarchy that they completely lost touch with the mechanics of value. They mistook Audrey's silence for weakness and her humility for incompetence. This is a fatal error in both business and life. Never confuse the volume of someone's voice with the depth of their capability. Audrey represents the archetype of the quiet professional. She teaches us that the most dangerous person in the room is not the one shouting orders or bragging about projections. It is the one listening, observing, and taking notes. While her family was busy signaling their importance, she was busy building it. She demonstrates that true power does not need to announce itself. It does not require validation from others because it is self-sustaining. Furthermore, the narrative highlights the strategic advantage of being underestimated. Being the black sheep or the outcast gave Audrey a cloak of invisibility. It allowed her to maneuver without scrutiny. She turned her family's neglect into her greatest asset, using the time they ignored her to outpace them. The ultimate takeaway is that revenge is best served not through arguments or emotional outbursts, but through absolute, undeniable success. You do not need to tell people they are wrong about you. You simply need to wait until the results speak for themselves. In a world full of noise, be the signal. Stop broadcasting your plans and start building your empire in silence. Please subscribe my channel Daily Reddit Readings for more updates.